Now, the Egyptian economy is starting to reap the benefits of measures launched in November 2016, such as lifting the currency restrictions, raising taxes, cutting fuel subsidies. The nation's stock index is one of the world's best performing. It's number 4 on the league table this year. A predictable election win for President El-Sisi is expected to pave the way for additional fiscal changes. Let's welcome our guest to the show. It is Middle East senior economist Razan Nasser. Razan, great to have you with us again. So in some ways, maybe the low-hanging fruit has been plucked. The FX moves, the energy subsidies, the food subsidies. What's next for El-Sisi? Are we at a crossroads in terms of the adjustment process?
Thank you, Mas. Well, I don't want to take away credit from what they've done so far. It's been extremely impressive, and certainly on the external account especially. We've seen the current account deficit fall to a third of its size 1 year ago in Q4, and that's on the back of better tourism revenues, better remittances, and higher exports. So from here, there's certainly a lot more still to be done. And on the fiscal side is one area where they've done a lot, but it's still quite a challenging situation. The deficit is still close to 10%. The debt is over 100% of GDP. And so that's quite still, that will require still a lot more work to do. And more importantly is that the structural reforms beyond that as well to get the economy into its potential growth rate.
Let me pick up on Egyptian debt because Egyptian government bonds have been one of the top trades for EM credit traders in 2017. It still remains the case in 2018. We put the chart together to showcase what's been happening with Egyptian borrowing costs. The yields have begun to drop just a little bit. So we've added here the 3, the 6, the 9-month average yield and also the 1-year yield. And we also added the benchmark rate from the central bank, which has continued about its easing cycle in the last MPC. There are questions, though, about how this affects a budget deficit, how this affects sustainability from a fiscal point of view. When does it become concerning for you as an economist?
Well, the interest rates, I mean, the 700 basis point hike has been painful for the government finances for sure. Debt servicing is already making up about a third of public spending, and that's part of the challenge on the fiscal side that I've talked about. So it's certainly a welcomed relief that rates are starting to come down. And it's justified as well. We've already seen inflation fall to less than half of where it was just 9 months ago. And hopefully, if it does continue on that trajectory, then we do expect them to cut another 200 basis points. In the context of the trade, I think the carry trade has been quite attractive, and it's had already $20 billion come in. Probably the flows won't continue to come at the same pace given the size of the stock, but and also with rates falling down. But what you've got is an improving fundamental story, which would justify lower yields on the back of it.
We're waiting for the inflation data on March the 10th. We've just had the PMIs, and you've gone behind that headline number. The March PMI, 49.2, still in contraction, okay? In contraction. But you talk about the input and the output price growth, and that for you is perhaps the bigger story.
Yeah, it is interesting that they do continue to decline. So it is conducive to a lower inflation print coming up on the 10th of the month. I think it is still a risk, though. We shouldn't get complacent about inflation. It has been very low the last couple of months, but it can always come back up. Egypt has always had traditionally high inflation for a lot of domestic supply constraints, among other issues. So it's still a risk, but I think for the time being, it's on quite a positive trajectory.
I think this is a good opportunity to circle back to the fact that Egypt's stock market is the 4th best performing in the world in the indices tracked by Bluemberg. In spite of a lot of the volatility and the uncertainty that we've had in global markets, does that mean Egypt is maybe a little bit more resilient to the kind of trade tensions and global sort of financial disruptions than any other market?
Egypt, is in a bit of a unique position for sure. Everywhere else is fighting deflation. Egypt is fighting high inflation. Everywhere else is hiking rates. Egypt is cutting rates. I think the interesting part for Egypt is that they've started off from such a low base after so many years of stagnation. And And the gains that have been done so far, while very impressive, have been cyclical. And I think that's part of the challenge of how do you continue that momentum going forward. There needs to be more on the structural side. There needs to be, and those kind of reforms are more challenging because they're not so time pressing. They take time to realize benefits. So it'll be interesting to see what they do on that agenda.